Hello everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in the ValueNotes webinar series. The topic for today's webinar is value for money comparison between primary and secondary research for competitive intelligence. I am Varsha Chitale. I am director at ValueNotes and the presenter for today's webinar. I'll first give you a quick introduction to ValueNotes, after which we'll go straight into the topic for today. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please feel free to post them in the chat window and we'll address them at the end of our presentation. ValueNotes is a 12-year-old business research and intelligence firm based in Pune, India. We have over 90 analysts who service global clients from diverse geographies including US, UK, continental Europe, Australia, APAC, and of course India. We are known for our strong ethics and the depth of our research and insights we provide in multiple industries. Our mission is to help customers gain competitive advantage via actionable intelligence. And we do this by providing a range of products and services across the research value chain, from data gathering to data synthesis, analysis, and finally business decisions. We help companies set up businesses, survive, compete, grow, and become leaders in their industry. We offer a range of services from regular monitoring of the business environment to custom research for answering specific questions or needs of our customers, to training and consulting on competitive intelligence. We have gained recognition from a variety of quarters. We've been quoted in senior magazines including The Economist, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and we've won several prestigious awards. We've participated actively in the SKIP conferences. SKIP stands for the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals. It is the largest global professional organization for competitive intelligence. We have been nominated to speak and present at several SKIP conferences in recent years. Let's move now to our topic for today. Value for money comparison between secondary and primary research for competitive intelligence. Mulling on the value for money aspect of competitive intelligence, a key point to remember is that it is not possible to have 100% information on your environment, or in other words, it's infinitely expensive to have 100% information. However, it is possible to get actionable analysis about the environment with less than 100% information. In that respect, we can liken competitive intelligence to a jigsaw puzzle, where one can make out what the picture is, even if a few pieces of the jigsaw are missing. In order to maximize the return on investment on research, the aim is to get the minimum number of pieces to answer your question. So what are these pieces and how many do you need? Well, the number of pieces required depends on the problem statement, on what the problem statement is, and how you plan to use the findings. The greater the granularity of information required for answering the problem statement, the more the number of pieces required. Once you determine the optimal number of pieces you need, you want to get them most efficiently. And this is where our current topic is relevant. How do you choose the right technique for doing research so as to get the required number of pieces efficiently? Value for money seeks quality and effectiveness in terms of return on investment. So essentially, for maximizing the ROI, what you want is high quality in terms of accuracy, reliability and actionability of the research done, fast turnaround time because time is money and opportunities are lost if there are delays, and low cost of getting the information. We will evaluate primary and secondary research on these parameters of quality, turnaround time and cost. So how do you select between secondary and primary research? Secondary research here means looking at all materials published in newspapers, magazines, journals, databases, industry portals, government records, social media, and so on. Primary research includes quantitative surveys as well as qualitative interviews, which are done online, through mailers, telephonically, or face-to-face. The overall pros and cons of primary research and secondary research are listed here. Naturally, there are many exceptions to these generalizations, but it's still useful to understand the basic limitations and advantages of the two techniques. In general, secondary research is perceived to be cheap and fast. It requires fewer skill sets. In other words, it's easy to do. On the other hand, many analysts perceive primary research as being time-consuming, expensive, and difficult to do. While there are certainly some exceptions to this, in general these perceptions are borne out in practice. Secondary research is suitable for obtaining facts and figures and names. It can also be used for getting a first-level understanding on companies, industries, and other topics, and the topics earlier. However, it's hard to get good insights and answers to very specific questions through secondary research. For insights and specific answers, primary research is more valuable as it allows you to interact with the holder of the information. For example, when secondary research can tell me that knives with plastic handles as against wooden handles are popular in India as compared to the US, primary research allows me to question the users and manufacturers of knives in India about why this is so and understand the underlying imperatives of the users of knives in India. Ethics is a non-issue as far as secondary research is concerned. It is by definition always totally ethical as you are only referring to published information. However, with primary research, you must be mindful of ethical boundaries. This is particularly important in India as unethical practices in competitive intelligence are more prevalent here than in some developed economies. An obvious aspect of ethical CI is staying within the boundaries of what is legal. So bribery, blackmail, threatening, stealing is all out of question. A more subtle point is to do with misrepresentation. It is not ethical to pose as someone you're not in order to elicit information. For instance, it is not ethical to pose as a recruiter to elicit information on someone's salary. Or it is not okay to say you're a student doing an MBA paper to gather information on your competitor. Another form of misrepresentation that is rampant in India is calling candidates from your competitor's organization for job interviews with the sole intention of pumping them for information on the competitor. PI teams are often constrained by the budget they have. How can I get the best actionable intelligence or the answer to my problem statement within the budget I have? Since secondary research is generally believed to be cheaper and faster, they often decide to limit their research to secondary research. This is not necessarily the most efficient approach in terms of quality, cost, or time. Your choice of technique or the optimal mix of secondary and primary research depends on various things, such as what kind of intelligence you need, what is your current level of knowledge on the topic of research, is secondary data on the subject you are investigating easily available, how critical is the intelligence to you or to the end user of the intelligence. We'll tackle these one at a time to understand how you can go about figuring the optimal mix of secondary and primary research for you. So the first thing you need to ask is, what is your intelligence need? Are you looking for data, facts and figures, or are you looking for deep insights? As the depth of research required goes up, the usefulness of secondary research decreases. Deep insights on specific business issues are better obtained by talking to knowledgeable people. In fact, in some cases, we have found that relying solely on secondary research can be misleading. We were recently commissioned by a charity trust to do a feasibility study for setting up a veterinary hospital. We were able to get most of the data on demographics and so on from government sources. We had cattle population in the region, we had cattle health data. We also got a list of existing hospitals in the vicinity of the proposed location of the hospital. And using this, we concluded that there was an acute shortage of hospital facilities for cattle in that region. Based on this research, our initial conclusion was that demand for a veterinary hospital would be very high in this region. However, when we conducted ethnographic and field research, our findings were negative. We discovered that the cattle owners don't actually take their animals to veterinary hospitals, as transporting the cattle to hospital was as expensive as getting them treated. The vets actually needed to go to the farms to treat the animals. So setting up a large-scale veterinary hospital was not feasible at all. There was need for mobile vet services that could service the animals on the farm. Had we limited up our research to published sources, we would have given our clients incorrect recommendations. The need here was not for data but for insights and recommendations. Secondary research will often suffice for obtaining factual macro data. Micro-level granular data may be available from secondary sources in some sectors. There is more micro-level data available in developed economies than in emerging countries. Some of this may need to be validated through primary research to increase your confidence level. Similarly, data on niche segments in geography is often not documented. Finally, answers to specific questions and deep insights can only be obtained from primary research. Once you know what your need is, what is your starting point? If you have a very low level of knowledge on the subject that you are researching, you need to do some basic desk research to understand the lay of the land. For example, before studying the pumps market, you need to have some basic knowledge of the types of pumps, their technologies, their applications, the manufacturers, and so on. It's possible to access these basic, access this data on products, etc. from online sources. In most industries, you can gain a basic understanding of products, technologies, companies, and so on from secondary sources fairly quickly. In nascent markets, it's possible that even basic information is not published. For instance, the mobile payments market in India is very nascent. It is not possible to get a quick overview of it by doing desk research. A faster and more efficient way in terms of time and cost maybe to talk to a couple of people in the industry so you understand the basics on the services, products, players, and so on. Alternatively, if you're studying a very highly technical product area, but you don't have the technical background, you may find it very hard to understand the jargon. It is then faster to go to an industry expert or a technology expert to understand some basic terms. For instance, while investigating the state of vaccine R&D in India, we found that spending an hour with a biotechnology expert was the fastest way to come up to speed on various vaccine types and technologies. Another key parameter to consider while choosing your research technique is availability of information that you are looking for from secondary sources. In general, developed economies have more information available from published sources than emerging economies. Here is an example. If you are trying to understand the used car market in India and in the US, you will need to go about it in very different ways. Although the market in both the places is fragmented, in the US it consists of organized players that are registered. There is a lot of granular data and ready reports available on size, segmentation, and characteristics of the market. In India, on the other hand, the market consists of unregistered enterprises, including small roadside garages, and so it's undocumented. It is impossible to get anything at all on the market side from published materials. to get any kind of actionable insights on the market in India, one would need to do intensive primary research. For sizing, some estimation techniques using extrapolation would need to be used. The decision to research the market or not will then depend on the value of the information to the user. In underdocumented economies like India, many times analysts encounter misleading or contradictory information from published sources. For example, while studying the credit card charges in India, we found different figures from different online sources that varied widely because the definition of what was included was not uniform and not clear. So even though the credit card segment is very well documented in India, the numbers needed to be validated using additional primary sources. Even in developed economies, if you are studying some niche segments or specific aspects of business, there may not be adequate published information on it. For example, if you want data on shares of different sales channels, online, telephonic, face-to-face and so on, for specific types of IT products in different geographies, this is not published anywhere. We spoke to sales and marketing executives in the company across global regions in order to get this information. Primary research is sometimes made part of the research plan even if there is a lot of secondary research available. In one instance, we found that there is a lot of documented data on security regulations in manufacturing units in EMEA countries like Oman, UAE and so on. Nevertheless, we did some quick basic primary research in these countries to understand how seriously the regulations were actually enforced. In this case, all our findings from secondary research were verified through primary research. So primary research did not necessarily add anything new. What it did do is, it increased our level of confidence in our findings and recommendations that came from secondary research. If you are doing CI in India, you will find that availability of published information is very low. There are several reasons for this. Most industries are highly fragmented. What this means that there are a large number of small companies spread geographically. Also, the unorganized sector is very large. What we mean by unorganized is that the enterprises are not registered with any authority, or they are not regulated by any authority, or they don't maintain books of accounts. Typically, these enterprises are very small. The unorganized sector in India accounts for 90% of the workforce and nearly 60% of GDP. Almost 80% of all enterprises are unregistered. India is also a very diverse market. There are income differentials between states, between individuals. There is the urban-rural divide, a large variety of languages, cultures, different regulations in different states in the country. Then in some product areas, there is a fairly large grey market where transactions don't get reported as goods and services are bought and sold without paying taxes such as sales tax, octroi or import duty. Because of all these factors, the statistical machinery in India is overburdened. Industry associations, with a few exceptions, are not strong and don't have their own data collection mechanism. The private sector participation in gathering and collating of data and statistics is also very low, as there is not enough demand for research and information. The market for information and research is nascent. To conclude, there are a few pockets where the level of documentation is high, but in general, there is very little secondary data that CI analysts have available to them. In general, in India, therefore, the reliance on desk research is low and the need for primary research, estimation, validation and triangulation techniques is high. Another question to ask yourself pertains to the criticality of the research you are doing. Your value for money calculation must take into account the monetary implications of your research findings. If the stakes are high, you need a high level of confidence in your intelligence findings. Or in other words, you need to figure out the value of your research field and then compare it with the cost of doing your research. If a company wants to invest millions of rupees on infrastructure, employees, networks, and so on for entering a new market, it may want to be very sure that it has carefully considered all aspects of business and associated risks in advance. It would not be wise to limit the intelligence gathering to a particular technique or methodology. You need to do whatever is required for gaining confidence in your strategy and plan. The potential losses arising from incorrect decisions would be much higher than the costs of doing exhaustive research. So the company here may in fact undertake research in phases, going deeper at every phase for creating increasingly granular strategies and plans for its new venture. To sum up what we've just discussed, here is a quick grid to help you decide the optimal mix between primary and secondary research phases. Remember that having a budget constraint does not mean that you must do only secondary research. You need to choose an appropriate mix of depth research and primary research, depending on what you need, your current knowledge level, the availability of secondary data, and the criticality or the value of research field. Sometimes a very small amount of targeted primary research can yield much more actionable intelligence than several days of secondary research. You may decide to do an initial primary research followed by intensive depth research, or initial depth research and then add to your understanding by doing interviews or other combinations of the two techniques. How do you know what combination will work for you? First, you need to establish your research objective. What is the value of the findings to your company? Do you have a budget to work within? It is then advisable to do an initial one or two hours of intensive depth research to figure out the characteristics of the animal you are tackling. Do you understand the topic at hand? Is there a lot of published material? Are there ready-made reports or databases available? Is it a nascent market or a nascent industry? Once you pin all these down, it will be possible for you to design your research methodology. Once you've worked out your methodology, don't forget that you need to actually do the research efficiently in order to get value for your money. You can spend days on doing something that could have been done in hours. To address the question of how to do primary research and secondary research efficiently, we'll need to do separate webinars on each of them. However, here are some quick tips on the most important aspects of executing efficiently. For secondary research, remember that there is life beyond Google. There are search engines, meta search engines, and also the deep web. Deep web or the invisible web is made up of pages that require login or pages that have forms on them. Data that is contained within these sites cannot be found using Google searches. Websites of organizations such as World Bank, United Nations, and so on are examples of such. You have to enter the name of the country, type of data required, years for which you want data, and so on to access the data that's underneath. There is also life beyond the internet, particularly in a country like India. There is a lot of information that is available offline, particularly government statistics. Municipal corporations, for instance, don't have anything online, but you can get quite a lot of local data from them. Don't assume everything published is authentic. Check if the source is credible. In many instances, we have found conflicting data from different sources. You need to evaluate the credentials and the possible biases of each source. The Wikipedia, for instance, is not considered to be authentic as the content is user-generated. But users are required to give sources of information, and it's possible to go to the original source to see if they are authentic. Develop good search strings and don't give up after the first page of results. For this, You need an understanding of keywords, Boolean operators, advanced searches, and so on. For primary research, you need to work out an appropriate research design. This includes an appropriate sample size, respondent type, approaches, questionnaires, and so on. For instance, if you ask a question to the wrong person or you use an inappropriate pickup line, you are likely to have the phone slammed down on you. Primary research allows you the opportunity to cross-question the respondent. Use it to the fullest by being totally clear about what you're seeking to understand and effectively probing on everything the respondent tells you. Finally, for doing effective research, both secondary and primary, you need persistence and a never say die attitude. You have to believe that the answer to your question is out there somewhere and you simply have to get to it one way or the other. This brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you. I see that there are a few questions that people have posted. If you have any more questions, do feel free to post them. We'll just tackle them one at a time now. I have our CEO Arun Jethmalani with us to also answer a few questions. Just give us a minute to figure out what the questions are. The first question I have here is, you mentioned a code of ethics for primary research. The question is from Meenakshi. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? So the SKIP, which is the largest industry organization, does have a code of ethics that is published on their website. And the code of ethics basically has 3 or 4 key pillars. One of the things is what I mentioned earlier, that everything you do has to be legal. Nothing illegal can be done. Secondly, no misrepresentation. Again, I think we went into it a little bit. What it means is you can't pose as somebody or not. You need to be truthful about who you are while doing research. The third thing is to give completely honest recommendations to whoever it is you're giving recommendations to. So for example, if the person doesn't like the research you've done, that's too bad. You need to be able to stick to what you believe in and stand by your recommendations. The fourth thing is to do with conflict of interest. So you need to be sure that your interest, there's no conflict of interest in what you're doing. So for instance, if you work with a company, and your husband or your brother or sister works with a competitor, you need to be very careful about how you share information between the two. Or for a company like ours, conflict of interest means that we can't be working with 2 competitors at the same time or have the same team working for 2 different competitors at the same time. So that's basically on ethics. I have another question here from Ranjit Singh. It says, what is the best way to get competitor information that we have within the company? So there are 2 or 3 things here actually to get information within the company. A lot of times the sales people have a lot of information because the sales people constantly interact with external parties, with the distributors, with customers. Sometimes the sales people have friends who work with competitors, or they meet people who meet other competitors and so on. So the best way to get information from your sales people for a CI team is to actually regularly interact with the sales team, to sensitize the sales team on the importance of the data that they have for the organization, for creating incentivizing the sales team. So basically the sales team wants to just sell, and their own bonuses depend on how much they sell. But if there are other incentives created for them to share data as well with the rest of the organization, create adequate, motivate them adequately in order to share information, that can be done. Companies with good knowledge, internal knowledge management systems find it easier to share this information. So really, it's creating all of these. I have another question here.
Hi, this is Arun. There's a question about social media that you not mentioned social media. Do you think it's a valid source for secondary research? This question is from Ashwin. So the social media is a valuable source of, let's say, trends. I don't think it's a valuable source of information per se. You know something about the industry and somebody posts something. It is not verified. It could give you good leads, a hint of what is going on, but then you need to verify it. So it is a source of intelligence. It's not reliable in itself. Uh, in terms of aggregates or trends, it can be very useful, however.
We have another question from Ketan. He said, is it possible to get a soft copy of this presentation? Yes, it is possible to get a soft copy. In fact, we'll be putting up a recording of this webinar and we'll post it on our website. And we'll send a link to everyone who attended. So you'll be able to go and refer to it if you need to.
Just going back to the earlier question from Ranjeev about competitive information within the company. Even apart from the sales people, there are a lot of people who might have worked elsewhere or know different things. I think this is something that a lot of companies struggle with. You have to develop some kind of framework for the information that you need and therefore where it's going to get collected from. Once you know exactly what kind of input you're looking for, it will be possible to categorize different types of employees into groups depending on what kind of information they might have or might be getting from the market. And thereafter, like I just said, you have to incentivize them, find a way for that information to go back into the system for analysis. So it's not easy, but it can be done if you have already developed a good CI framework within your company.
I have a question here. It's from Shilpa and she asks, is it possible for corporates to do effective primary research? It is possible. It is possible for corporates to do primary research. There are some limitations though on what they can and can't do. For instance, if you go to a competitor and you say, can you give me XYZ information, they are not going to give it to you. And if you're doing CI ethically, you are going to reveal that you're from the competitor company. And then it's very difficult to get them to give you information. Even if it's not confidential, it's likely that they won't share it with you. So to that extent, it's a little bit harder than it is for third-party service providers like us. We can go to them saying we're a research company and we'd like to have the information on your company, and it's easier for us to elicit information from them. But when it comes to doing primary research with other industry participants, if you want to talk to your distributors, you want to talk to industry experts, you want to talk to anybody else, I think it is possible for corporates to do primary research effectively. As long as once you develop the skill sets for it, it is possible to do it. We have one more question. It's from Hemangi. She asks, many a times it really becomes difficult to get responses from the target respondents to primary research, especially in India. Do you think there is a need to create awareness about market research in order to get a proper response? Or what steps should we take in order to get a proper response?
Himangi, this is a tough one. The kind of people we want to talk to are often very busy and don't have a lot of time to share this, even if they are willing. This is really where I think the skill of the interviewer, right from how they approach the respondent, how they engage with them, we found that just the way you engage can ensure that the respondent is more cooperative, spends more time on the phone. So these are certain skills that need to be developed, and then elicitation, or how you steer the conversation, that you get things out without actually needing to ask direct questions. And this is can be difficult unless you're very clear about what you are looking for. Very often, if you ask people questions like what is the revenue and what is, they're not going to ask. So you have to extract that information, derive that information, find a way to make the respondent feel comfortable. I think that's the first thing. If someone is comfortable talking to you, they will speak more, and that's the first thing that a primary researcher needs to do.
We have a question from Naresh. He asks, where does most research go wrong? Arun, you want to answer?
Yeah, so there are lots of things that can happen. Assuming your analysis is correct and your assumptions are correct, the big problem is really in the quality of the data. Again, especially in India where you don't have good secondary sources. So it goes wrong because you haven't validated what you've got. You've got some data from secondary source, you probably get 3 more from other secondary sources which are the same thing, but you need to question that, what is the assumption, where they got it from. So validation is a big thing, validation or triangulation. And this goes back actually to the beginning. How do you design your research? When you design, have to calculate the market size or have to find out something about a particular market. How do you design for it? Are you ensuring that you're collecting different types of information from different people in a manner that it can be triangulated or validated or verified? If you don't collect it upfront, there's not much you can do in the end. So it's really down to good design of research. So you actually think about how you are going to validate the quality of the information.
Do we have any more questions?
There's another question from Sakshi Mehta, and he's saying, how does one learn primary research techniques? This is a difficult one. You have to, a lot of learning comes from practice, doing it. People who are good conversationalists tend to be good at primary research. People who are not scared of calling strangers tend to be good at primary research. And there's a lot of literature, there's training available. In fact, ValueNotes conducts training on primary research for young analysts.
Ketan is asking any clue for the subject of the next webinar. Thanks for asking, Ketan. We are actually in the process of coming out with a webinar calendar. We'll be doing several webinars in the coming months, and we'll as soon as we publish it, we'll certainly inform everyone of what the calendar is, and we will definitely be announcing these webinars and sending you mailers. If you do have any topics that you're specifically interested in, do write in to us. You can write to me at valuenotes.co.in. And let me know if you have any suggestions, anything that you are interested to know about. We're happy to take that up as well. Thank you everyone for attending our webinar, and we enjoyed the fact that you joined us. We'll post the recording, as I mentioned earlier, of today's webinar on our website, and we'll send you the link in case you want to download it. Please do share it with the others who may be interested. We'll also email you a short feedback form asking you how you found our presentation and some suggestions if you have any. We request all of you to fill this up, and this will help us a lot with our future webinars. It will help us to make them more useful. So good evening to everyone who's in the Indian time zone, and for those in the US, have a nice day and goodbye. Thank you.
The organizer